The torque spun. Neutronium, dense as a dead star's heart, caught the light from a star 400 light-years away and kept spinning. No one reached for it. No one could. The Hollow had already stopped being a ship. 52 impacts in 11 seconds, then nothing. The bone matrix hull, grown over centuries, registered its final hit and simply gave up. 300 vessels in the formation. 300 became zero. No explosions, no heroism, no broadcast of victory. Only the silence of a fleet that no longer existed, and on an open channel 3 notes. Low, broken, unmistakably human. The war had been won in 9 minutes. The galaxy had not even heard the song. 4 days earlier, Admiral Bryn Soar held the harmonica in her left hand and stared at a count that did not add up. 47 times the Zorvani had audited Earth's shipyards. 47 times they had certified compliance. They had sent their archons and their fleet masters and their 6-jointed auditors with their gill slits whistling through every corridor. They had counted every weld. They had inspected every manifest. They had missed 340 ships. "The deadline is 18 hours, Lieutenant Myra Thorne said, and her voice did not shake. "They want the corridor. They're calling it administrative relocation." "Of course they are." Soar set down the ceramic cup she had been holding, cracked, salvaged from a Titan yard in 2811, too old to be regulation and too familiar to replace. "They always call it that." The display behind Thorne showed the Zorvani fleet. 300 Spear-class dreadnoughts, 900 support vessels, 2.4 million ground troops in cryo, and 1 Archon, Korath Ven, who had already written the press release. "The vote was 2,847 to 3, Thorne added. "They certified Earth as negligible." Soar turned from the display. "They vote on us like we're a line item." "They vote on everything like that. It's how they run 38 systems." 38 systems. Soar ran her thumb over the harmonica's dented brass. "And they've never once considered that the thing they're auditing might have something to hide." Thorne waited. She had learned in 3 years under Soar that the Admiral did not waste words. When she said something twice, it meant something. When she said nothing at all, it meant everything. "Tell me the math," Soar said. "The Black Iron has been in slipspace for 89 years. The last public record of any human military vessel was the Kepler Accords. The Zorvani certified the conversion of all shipyards to agricultural fabrication. They signed the footnotes. They never read them." Soar held up the harmonica. "This was manufactured in Marseille, 2089. Thorne blinked. "I don't follow." "The shipyard that built the first black iron vessel opened in Marseille, 2091. 2 years after the harmonica. 2 years after my great-great-grandmother left Earth and never went back." Soar turned the harmonica over, letting the light catch the dented side. "She carried it in her pocket for 63 years, never played it for anyone." Thorne finally understood. "It's not just an object." "No," Soar set the harmonica back on her desk. "It's a question that already knows its answer." The veil stretched 14 light-years ahead of them, a corridor of navigable space wedged between ion storms on one side and a collapsed dwarf star's debris field on the other. The only stable route between the Zorvani core worlds and the Realoi frontier. Earth held the choke point. The Zorvani wanted it. They had wanted it for 50 years. They had filed requests, submitted paperwork, restructured 3 different administrative districts to make the claim legally sound. The hegemony did not invade. It did not conquer. It administered. When they took a system, they called it restructuring. When they killed a species, they called it compliance enforcement. Every death had been pre-approved by a committee of 12. Korath Ven had spent 600 years perfecting this vocabulary. He wore a torque of compressed neutronium around his neck, the hegemony's highest honor, awarded for the administrative cleansing of 12 dissident colonies. His carapace shoulder plates were etched with the names of 47 worlds he had restructured. He tapped his secondary thumbs together when he believed he had won an argument. He believed he was winning now. The corridors, he said, are not for negotiation. They are for declaration. Commander Jorik Venn, his nephew, 34 cycles old, eager, tapping his own thumbs where his uncle could not see, leaned forward. The human admiral has not responded to the ultimatum. She will. Koreth did not look up from his display. They always do. The question is whether she will comply or require demonstration. The bridge of the asterisk hollow asterisk stretched around them, a vault of crystallized bone matrix grown into a cathedral of structural efficiency. It had taken the Zorvani 4,000 years to perfect this engineering. They had grown dreadnoughts from living tissue, shaped by ritual and gravity. The hollow was the finest of them. 3.2 kilometers of war, hardened by centuries of administrative success. The humans have 12 cutters, Jorik continued. 2 non-operational, the rest docked in a classified maintenance facility the auditors found 3 years ago. Found. The humans were not hiding it, they simply did not announce it. Koreth's central eye, the one that tracked subordinates longest, turned toward his nephew. A species that does not announce its military capacity is not hiding it. They have nothing to hide. The Kepler Accords dissolved their fleet. The auditors have certified compliance 47 times. 47, Jorik repeated. 47, the number has meaning. Koreth tapped his thumbs. It means they have had 47 opportunities to hide something. They have not taken any of them. In 47 audits, they never concealed a thing. No. They were boring, thorough, transparent. Koreth allowed himself a thin note of pressure through his gill slits, his equivalent of a smile. That is why we are taking their corridor. They have shown us everything. There is nothing left to find. At hour 14 of 18, Sor watched the Zorvani fleet approach the mouth of the Vale. The display on her bridge was 12 meters wide. It showed 300 spear-class dreadnoughts arranged in a spear formation, a design that had broken the fleets of 27 species across 6,000 years. It was beautiful in its way, mathematically elegant, the geometry of certainty. She had studied it for 4 months before the ultimatum arrived. There's a pattern to their arrogance, she said. Chief Petty Officer Elias Darrow looked up from the engine diagnostics, the wrench in his hand, stamped with the Kepler shipyard logo, 2758, was older than half the crew. Ma'am. The spear formation. It's designed to break a known quantity. They compute the enemy's center of gravity, then they strike it. Sor touched the display. They're very good at that. They've done it 27 times. So what happens when they don't know the center of gravity? Sor had been waiting for someone to ask that question. Then the formation collapses, because they never planned for absence. Thorn approached with a datapad. Admiral, the Harmonica fleet is in position. Sor took the datapad. She did not correct Thorn's nickname. It had caught on 4 months ago, after Darrow had pointed out that a fleet that existed only in off-the-books shipyards and unregistered slipspace routes deserved a name that fit the folklore. The Black Iron had been the official designation for 89 years. The Harmonica fleet was what the crew called it when the admiral was not listening. She was listening now. She said nothing. All 340 vessels, Thorn continued. Mass driver arrays loaded, radar-absorbent coatings active, thermal signature at ambient background. If the Zorvani are looking for 12 cutters, they will find exactly 12 cutters. And the other 328 will be where the Zorvani never thought to look. Sor nodded. She did not express satisfaction. She had learned 31 years ago that satisfaction was a luxury she could not afford. She had watched 400 civilian refugees die because she had refused an order to abandon them, and she had been right, and it had cost her nothing because the cost had already been paid by someone else. She had never forgotten that. She had made sure the cost would never be paid again. The deadline, she said, is 4 hours. The steadfast is ready. You want to be the face on every channel. Soar considered the question. She did not want to be the face on every channel. She wanted to be the arithmetic they never saw coming. Yes, she said, I want to be that face. At hour 16, the UEF** steadfast appeared at the edge of the veil. One ship, one admiral, one screen. Soar's face filled the Zorvani command channels. She did not look like a threat. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been calculating for 89 years. You have 4 hours remaining, she said. I am asking you to use them. On the hollow asterisk, Commander Jorik Vin laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had been told to expect nothing and was receiving exactly that. One human admiral, one obsolete cutter, a speech that sounded more like a request than a warning. She is asking us to use them, Jorik repeated. She is asking. The species that has 12 cutters and no fleet is asking. Koreth's secondary thumbs tapped together. She is trying to buy time. For what? For something she does not have. Humans do that, they delay, they appeal. They make noise. Koreth tapped harder. It is what they have always done. They are a species that measures time in generations. They think the long game is theirs to play. Is it? Koreth's central eye fixed on his nephew. No, the long game belongs to those who count. The humans count very slowly. They have 47 audits to prove it. He turned back to the display. She is not a threat. She is a clerk with a rank. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar watched the Zorvani fleet maintain its formation. She had expected nothing less. I think they're laughing at us, Thorn said. They are, that's the point. Soar touched the steel band on her pinky. Laughter is what they do when they do not know how to calculate. They substitute contempt for comprehension. What happens at hour 18? Soar picked up the ceramic cup from the console. She did not drink from it. She simply held it the way one holds a memory of a question. At hour 18, she said, the arithmetic begins. At hour 17, the Zorvani fleet still had not fired a shot. They did not need to. The spear formation was already in place. The destruction of the steadfast would take 9 seconds. The destruction of the 12 cutters would take 90 seconds. The complete administrative relocation of Earth's presence in the Veil would take 6 hours, as planned. They were ready. Admiral Thorn said, the Harmonica fleet is in position. 34 vessels at coordinates, the Zorvani marked as empty space 8 hours ago. Soar set down the cup. She lifted the harmonica to her lips. She did not play it. She simply held it, the way one holds a question that already knows its answer. Broadcast on all channels, she said. 1 message, 12 words. Thorn's hands moved. Ready. Soar spoke. The signal crossed the veil in 1.3 seconds. Every Zorvani vessel received it at the same moment. Your arithmetic is 89 years old. Let me show you the new math. And then the empty space was not empty anymore. From the observation blister of the hollow asterisk, Archon Koreth then watched the 340 vessels emerge from the mathematics of absence. They did not appear with fanfare. They did not broadcast their arrival. They simply existed where empty space had been, a fleet of ships whose hulls absorbed radar, whose engines emitted no thermal signature, whose mass driver arrays had been aiming at his formations since before he had finished his press release. Koreth's gill slits whistled, a high, thin note of pressure escaping. He had not made that sound in 400 years. The black iron arranged itself in a geometry he had never studied. A formation of absence, a pattern of erasure. The human ships did not form a spear. They did not form any formation the Zorvani knew. They formed a lattice, a web, an arrangement that could not be broken by a conventional strike because it did not have a center of gravity to strike. What is that? Jorik's voice had lost its confidence. Korath did not answer. He was counting. 340 vessels. The humans had 340 vessels. The humans were supposed to have 12. The math was wrong. The math had been wrong for 89 years. The auditors, Jorik said, they certified compliance. They counted every weld. The auditors did not know what they were seeing. Korath's secondary thumbs had stopped tapping. They were still now. They counted what they expected to count. 47 times. 47 times they saw what they were supposed to see. Korath's central eye tracked across the display. They missed 340 ships because they never thought to look for what does not announce itself. The tactical officer reported the contact. Then reported it again. Then a third time. The numbers did not change. The tactical officer's third report hung in the air. The numbers did not change. 300 Zorvani ships faced 340 human ships, and the humans had not fired a single shot. Recompute, Korath said. His voice was flat, controlled, the voice of an Archon who had never been wrong. The tactical officer recomputed. The numbers stayed the same. There is no error, the officer said. The contacts are real. The vessels are not in any registry. They have no thermal signature. They are made of something that does not reflect radar. Korath's secondary thumbs had stopped tapping entirely. They were motionless against each other, like two dead insects. Get me a visual. The display shifted. The black iron vessels resolved into shapes, angular, black, with no weapon ports visible. They were not beautiful. They were not terrifying. They were simply there, arranged in a formation that made no tactical sense. What is that formation? Jorik asked. His voice had lost its laugh. It had gained something thinner. The tactical officer zoomed in. The ships were spaced at irregular intervals, each one positioned so that any line of fire from a Zorvani spear would intersect at least 3 other human vessels. It was a lattice, a web, a pattern that turned attack into suicide. It's a defensive lattice, the officer said, but it's not defensive, it's a cage. Korath's central eye narrowed. A cage for whom? For us. The bridge went silent. The only sound was the low hum of the bone matrix hull, a sound the crew had heard every day for centuries. Today it felt different. Today it felt like the hum of a tomb. On the steadfast asterisk, Sor watched the Zorvani fleet shift slightly, a ripple of uncertainty. She had seen it before, not in battle but in simulations. The moment when an opponent realizes its assumptions are wrong. They're recalculating, Thorn said. Let them, they'll find no weakness. Sor touched the steel band on her pinky. I designed that formation myself. It took 11 years. 11 years of what? Of watching them, studying their geometry. Their spear formation has one flaw. It assumes the enemy has a center of gravity. We don't. We have a web. Every ship is a node. Every node is replaceable. They can't break what doesn't have a heart. Thorn stared at the display. The black iron held its position, silent, waiting. Admiral Thorn said, they're signaling. Put it through. Korath's face filled the screen. His gill slits were still, no whistle now. His voice was measured, professional, the voice of a bureaucrat who had just discovered his files were wrong. Admiral Sor, you have concealed military assets in violation of the Kepler Accords. Sor did not blink. The Kepler Accords dissolved Earth's fleet. They said nothing about construction. The construction of warships is a violation of the spirit of the Accords. The spirit of the Accords, Sor repeated the word slowly. You wrote the Accords, Archon. You signed them. You never read the footnotes. Korath's central eye twitched, a micro-movement that Sor had learned to read. He was unsettled. What footnotes? Section 12, subsection 9, paragraph 4. It defines fleet as registered vessels with active military classification. We built these ships under agricultural fabrication budgets. They were never classified as military. They were never registered. They don't exist in any file you've seen. Koreth's secondary thumbs pressed together harder. That is a legal technicality. Technicalities are the only thing your species respects, Archon. You built an empire on them. You cannot complain when someone uses your own arithmetic against you. The channel went silent, then Koreth spoke again. You have 4 hours remaining. I recommend you use them to evacuate your vessels. Soar smiled, a small dry smile that did not reach her eyes. I was about to say the same thing to you. The clock ticked down. Hour 17 became 16. The Zorvani fleet had not moved. They had not fired. They were frozen in place, their ships arranged in a spear formation that now looked like a target. Commander Jorik Ven stood in the secondary command deck, staring at the human fleet. He had read every audit report. He had memorized the list of 12 cutters. He had been certain that Earth was a non-entity. He had been wrong. Commander, his tactical officer said, the lattice is closing. The human vessels are shifting position. Jorik looked. The black iron was moving, slowly, deliberately, each ship adjusting its position by a few kilometers. The gaps between them were shrinking. The cage was tightening. They're not attacking, the officer said. They're containing. Containing what? Us. They're hurting us. If we try to break formation, we'll have to cross their firing lines. They've calculated every vector. Jorik's thumbs started tapping again. He could not stop them. How many mass driver arrays do they have? Each vessel has 4. That's 1,360 arrays total. The officer paused. They're all aimed at our ships, every single one. Jorik did the math in his head. 1,360 arrays firing tungsten slugs at 0.3 C. The spears would not last 10 seconds. Report to the Archon, Jorik said. Tell him we're trapped. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar hummed a sea shanty under her breath, an old one from the days of wooden ships and salt water. The tune was quiet, almost inaudible. Thorn caught it and smiled. I didn't know you hummed, Thorn said. I only hum when I'm calculating. Soar's eyes were fixed on the display. The shanty helps me keep time. It's a rhythm thing. What are you calculating now? The exact moment they break, it's coming. I can see it in their formation, the slight drift, the hesitation. They're a bureaucracy. Bureaucracies don't handle the unexpected. They're not firing. They won't. They don't know how to fight a war that doesn't follow their procedure. They have protocols for attack. They have protocols for retreat. They don't have protocols for being outmatched by an enemy that doesn't announce itself. Thorn looked at the display. The Zorvani fleet was still, too still, like a prey animal that had frozen in the open. So what do we do? Soar stopped humming. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the harmonica. She did not play it. She held it up to the light, letting the dented brass catch the glow from the display. We wait, she said. They'll make the first mistake, they always do. At hour 15, the Zorvani attempted to retreat. It was not a full retreat, it was a repositioning. The spear formation began to rotate, aiming to break the lattice's weak point, but the weak point did not exist. Every time a Zorvani ship shifted, 3 black iron vessels shifted with it, closing the gap. Koreth watched the geometry unfold. He had studied warfare for 600 years. He had never seen this. The lattice is adaptive, his tactical officer said. It responds to our movement in real time. They're using some kind of distributed command. Each ship acts independently but in coordination. Who is giving the orders? No one. The orders are built into the formation itself. It's autonomous. Koreth's gillslits whistled, a short, sharp note. He had made that sound 3 times in the past hour. He had not made it in 4 centuries. Autonomous, he repeated. Humans built a fleet that thinks for itself. Built it while we were auditing their agricultural equipment. Korath turned to his display. The lattice was now a perfect cage, a sphere of ships surrounding his fleet, with no gaps, no openings, no weak points. "Send a message," he said, "to Admiral Soar, ask her what she wants." The message went out. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar received the message. She read it once, then she read it again. "What do you want?" Thorn quoted. "Exactly the question I was expecting." Soar set down the datapad. "They're asking because they don't know. They're used to dictating terms. They've never been the ones asking." "So what do we want?" Soar looked at Thorn, then she looked at the display. The Zorvani fleet was a cage of lights, 300 ships, each one holding thousands of crew, each one built by a civilization that had never lost a war. "We want them to understand," Soar said. "Not to surrender, not to negotiate, to understand." "Understand what?" "That their arithmetic was wrong. That they spent 89 years looking at us and seeing nothing, and we spent 89 years building something they could not see. That the war is not won with fire. It is won with patience." Soar picked up the harmonica again. She did not play it. "Send this reply," she said. 12 words. Thorn typed. Soar spoke. "You have 3 hours remaining. Use them to comprehend." The reply arrived on the hollow asterisk. Korath read it. His secondary thumbs pressed together so hard that the joints made a soft cracking sound. "She wants us to comprehend," he said. Jorik frowned. "Comprehend what?" "That we were wrong." Korath set down the datapad. "That's what she wants. Not surrender, not territory. She wants us to admit that we never understood her species." "We don't admit that. We've never admitted that." "I know." Korath turned to the display. The lattice was still there. The human ships were still there. The clock was still ticking. "That is why she will win." Hour 14. The Zorvani had not fired a shot. They had not moved. They were paralyzed, not by fear, but by the failure of their own logic. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar watched the clock. She had calculated every second. She had planned for every contingency. She had spent 31 years preparing for this moment. "Admiral," Thorn said, "the Archon is signaling again." Korath's face appeared. His gill slits were working rapidly, not whistling but breathing, fast, too fast. "Admiral Soar, I have a proposal." Soar waited. "We will withdraw from the Veil. We will recognize your claim to this corridor. We will." "Stop," Soar's voice was flat. "I am not negotiating." Korath's eyes widened, all 3 of them. "Then what are you doing?" "I am notifying you. You have 2 hours to vacate this system. Every one of your ships must be beyond the Veil's exit point by then. If any vessel remains, it will be subject to removal." "Removal! Removal!" Korath's gill slits whistled, a long, thin note. He could not help it. "You have no authority to give that order." "I have 340 ships that say otherwise." Soar leaned forward. "You spent 6,000 years building an empire on the assumption that power is visible. You were wrong. Power is patience. Power is silence. Power is building a fleet in shipyards you inspected 47 times and never saw." Korath opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The transmission ended. On the hollow asterisk, the bridge was silent. The crew stood at their stations, frozen, waiting for orders that did not come. Korath Ven, Archon of the Hegemony, stared at the display and watched the clock. 1 hour and 59 minutes remained. He had never felt this before. He had never been forced to admit that his arithmetic was wrong. He had never faced an enemy that did not shout its power. "We are leaving," he said. Jorik stepped forward. "Leaving, we have not fought. Fighting is a decision. We have already lost the decision." "But the fleet." "The fleet is irrelevant. She has us outnumbered and outmaneuvered. If we attack, we die. If we stay, we die. The only choice is whether we die fighting or live to understand what happened. Korath touched his neutronium torque. It was cold against his fingers. Order the fleet to withdraw, all vessels, maximum speed. We will regroup at the frontier. The order went out. The Zorvani fleet began to turn, but the lattice did not open. The black iron held its position, refusing to let them pass. Jorik's voice cracked. "They're not letting us leave." Korath's central eye tracked across the display. The lattice was still closed. The human ships were not moving aside. "She said we have 2 hours. She did not say we could use them to flee." "What do we do?" Korath's secondary thumbs pressed together again, and then, for the first time in 600 years, they started to tremble. "We wait," he said. "We wait and we learn." On the steadfast asterisk, Sor watched the Zorvani fleet attempt to turn. She saw the confusion in their formation, the hesitation, the drift, the slow realization that they were trapped. Admiral Thorne said, "They're trying to withdraw. The lattice is holding." "Good." Sor touched the harmonica in her pocket. "Let them understand what it feels like to be the one who does not know." "Should we give them room?" "No, they need to see the full geometry. They need to know that we were never the prey." Thorne nodded. She had been in the fleet for 3 years. She had never seen anything like this. "Admiral, when this is over, what happens?" Sor turned to her. The question hung in the air, heavy as the iron storms on the edge of the veil. "What happens is simple. They go home. They spend 40 years writing reports. They hold conferences. They compose 900 pages of analysis. And they never, ever understand the 3 notes. The 3 notes. Sor lifted the harmonica. She held it up to the light. "Yes," she said, "the 3 notes that ended the war. They just don't know it yet." "Execute," Sor said. Thorne's hand hit the panel. The first tungsten slug left the mass driver rail. It crossed the void at 0.3 C, and in 0.8 seconds it punched clean through the outer hull of a Zorvani Spear-class dreadnought. No explosion, no fire, no decompression. Just a hole where the bridge had been, and then no more bridge. The second volley followed, then the third. Then the entire black iron lattice fired as one system, 360 mass driver arrays, each one releasing a slug the size of a person's forearm. They did not target engines. They did not target weapons. They targeted command decks, sensor arrays, and communication nodes. They targeted the ability to fight. "Impact on all forward vessels," the Zorvani tactical officer reported. 72 ships disabled. Korath's central eye tracked across the display. The numbers were impossible. "How many shots did they fire?" "All of them, Archon. They fired every array simultaneously." Korath's secondary thumbs pressed together. "Show me the formation now." The display updated. The black iron had shifted again, each ship sliding into a new position, closing the gaps in the lattice. The cage was now a noose. "They're not reloading," Jorik said. "They're just aiming." "They don't need to reload." Korath's voice was hollow. "They've already proven they can hit us. The next volley will be aimed at the remainder." The asterisk hollow asterisk registered its first impact 3 seconds later. The slug punched through the lower hull, 200 meters from the bridge. The bone matrix hull absorbed the shock but did not repair itself. The ship groaned, a low, resonant sound that traveled through every deck. "Impact on the primary hull," the officer said. "Damage to gravity stabilizers. We've lost structural integrity in Sector 7. Korath's gill slits whistled, a short, sharp note. He had made that sound 4 times now. "Return fire," he ordered. "All spears, concentrate on the lattice's center." The order went out. The Zorvani fleet fired, all 300 dreadnoughts, all their directed energy lances, all aimed at the apparent center of the human formation. The lances hit empty space. The black iron had shifted again, a coordinated drift that moved every vessel exactly 1.2 kilometers to port. The lances passed through the gaps, striking nothing. They predicted our targeting, the tactical officer said. They knew where we would aim. Koreth's secondary thumbs trembled. How? Because we always aim at the center. We have always aimed at the center. They have studied us for 89 years. The second Zorvani volley hit the same empty space. The third volley hit empty space again. On the fourth volley, the black iron stopped drifting. Instead, it fired. The second wave of tungsten slugs crossed the void in 0.8 seconds. This time, every Zorvani ship in the front line lost its bridge simultaneously. The spear formation collapsed. Jorik watched the display. The dreadnoughts were not exploding, they were simply ceasing to function. One moment they were ships, the next they were debris. No fire, no heroism, only cessation. The formation is broken, he said. We are not a formation anymore. We are a collection of targets. Koreth did not reply. He was staring at the display, watching his arithmetic dissolve. The hollow asterisk registered its second impact, then its third, then its fourth. Archon, we have lost communication with the secondary fleet. They are not responding. Are they destroyed? No, they are silent. They have power, but their command decks are gone. They cannot move. They cannot fight. Koreth's central eye twitched. He had never heard that word before. Silent. It was a word that meant absence. It was a word that meant nothing. Send a message to Admiral Soar, he said. Tell her we are reconsidering. The message went out. It did not receive a reply. The hollow asterisk registered its fifth impact, its sixth, its seventh. Each slug hit a different section of the hull, one below the hangar, one in the cryo bay, one directly above the bridge. Jorik grabbed the station to steady himself. She's not answering, she's just waiting. She's not waiting, Koreth's voice was flat. She's counting. Counting what? Counting down. She knows we cannot sustain this. She knows we have no answer. She is simply letting the arithmetic finish itself. The hollow asterisk registered its 12th impact, its 20th, its 33rd. The bridge lights flickered. The gravity stabilizers failed for 3 seconds, sending a wave of disorientation across the command crew. Jorik gripped the railing. Koreth did not move. Report, Koreth said. Structural integrity falling. We have lost 40% of the hull. The lattice is still holding. They are not letting us reposition. We are trapped inside a sphere of fire. The hollow asterisk registered its 42nd impact. Koreth turned to his display. The black iron fleet was still there, still silent, still waiting. They had not fired a single shot in the last 30 seconds. They did not need to. Archon, we are at 52 impacts. The officer's voice was trembling. The hull cannot take much more. Koreth's secondary thumbs stopped trembling. They pressed together, hard, final, like a door closing. 52, he repeated. Is there a pattern? Pattern? Are the impacts arranged in a sequence, a design? The officer checked the readings. Yes. They are spaced in a mathematical sequence, Fibonacci. Every impact is 1.6 times the distance of the previous one. They are not destroying us randomly. They are making a point. Koreth's gill slits opened wide. He had taught that sequence to his students. He had lectured on it for 4 centuries. The Fibonacci sequence was a pattern of nature, the spiral of galaxies, the curve of a shell, the arrangement of petals. The humans were using his own mathematics against him. They are teaching us, he said softly. Teaching us what? That they know what we know, and they know it better. The hollow asterisk registered its 52nd impact. The slug punched through the observation blister's outer wall and kept going, exiting through the opposite side without hitting anything else. The hole it left was perfectly round, a clean cut through the crystallized bone matrix. The observation blister was exposed to vacuum. Commander Jorik then searched the bridge for his uncle. The secondary command deck was empty. The war room was empty. He called up the internal sensors. The Archon was in the observation blister. "He's in the blister," Jorik said. "The one that just got hit, he's exposed." The tactical officer looked at the display. "The blister is compromised. No atmosphere, no structural stability." Jorik's thumbs started tapping, fast, uncontrolled, a rhythm of panic. He was going to lose his uncle. He was going to lose the Archon. He was going to lose everything. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar watched the asterisk hollow register its 50-second impact and continue to drift. She had been counting. She had known exactly how many impacts it would take. Admiral Thorne said, "The observation blister on the asterisk hollow was just compromised. The Archon was inside." Soar did not react. She reached for the ceramic cup on her console. She lifted it to her lips, took a single sip of cold tea, and set it down. "Was he?" she asked. "According to internal sensor traces, he's in vacuum." Soar looked at the display. The hollow was still drifting. Its hull was riddled with holes. Its crew was alive, but its command structure was collapsing. "Send a message to the hollow asterisk," she said. "One word." Thorne typed, "Surrender." The message went out. On the hollow asterisk, the message arrived on the secondary command deck. Jorik read it, one word, surrender. He looked at his screen. The hollow asterisk was surrounded by the black iron lattice. The fleet was in ruins. His uncle was in a vacuum, exposed to the void, likely dead. "We have no choice," he said. "We surrender." The word went out. The entire Zorvani fleet received it. They did not celebrate. They did not cheer. They simply stopped trying to fight. Korath then, alone in the observation blister, watched his fleet become mathematics. The blister had lost its atmosphere. His gill slits were closed, holding the last breath of air he had taken. He was in vacuum, dying or close to it, but he was still watching. He saw the lattice hold. He saw the humans not fire a single shot after the 50-second impact. He saw his fleet drift, silent, broken, mathematically erased. His secondary thumbs pressed together one final time, a tiny movement in the silent void, and then stopped. On the steadfast asterisk, Soar received the surrender. She read it once, then she read it again. "Thorne," she said, "record this, 12 words." Thorne's hands moved. Soar spoke. "You will withdraw. Your audits end here. Remember the silence." The message went out on all channels. And then Soar reached into her pocket. She lifted the harmonica to her lips. She did not play it. She held it there, the dented brass catching the light from a star 400 light-years away. The war was over. She had won. The galaxy had not yet heard the song. She lowered the harmonica. The bridge was quiet. The display showed the Zorvani fleet drifting, broken, silent. Thorne stood at her station, waiting. Darrow was in the engine room, monitoring the reactors. Everyone was waiting. Soar reached for the ceramic cup. She picked it up, turned it in her hands, and took a sip. The tea was cold. She set the cup down and picked up the harmonica again. "Open a channel," she said. "All frequencies." Thorne's hands moved. "Channel open." Soar lifted the harmonica to her lips. She played 3 notes. Low, broken, unmistakably human. The notes carried across the veil on an open channel, traveling 1.3 seconds to every Zorvani vessel. They were not a victory cry. They were not a warning. They were simply a sound, the sound of a species that had waited 89 years to speak. On the hollow, the crew heard the notes. They did not understand them. They were a simple melody, 3 descending notes, the kind a child might play on a toy, but they carried something else. A weight, a finality. Jorik then heard the notes from the secondary command deck. He had just ordered the surrender. He had just learned that his uncle was missing. The notes reached him like a whisper from a place he could not name. "What was that?" he asked. The tactical officer shook his head. "Unknown. It came from the human flagship, just 3 notes, no message attached." Jorik stared at the display. The Black Iron Fleet was still holding position. The Zorvani ships were still drifting. The war was over. And yet, those 3 notes felt like the only thing that mattered. On observation post 7, Ambassador Illis of the Valley watched the entire engagement from a safe distance. She had seen the lattice form. She had seen the impacts. She had seen the surrender. And she had heard the 3 notes. She wrote in her report, "The Zorvani measured strength in visibility. The humans measured it in patience. For 89 years, the galaxy believed they were building farms. They were building arithmetic." She paused, then she added one more line. "The 3 notes were not a victory signal. They were a statement of existence. The humans did not need to shout. They had already been heard." On the Hollow, the search for Archon Koreth Vin began. Jorik led the rescue team to the observation blister. The airlock cycled. The team emerged into vacuum, their suits glowing against the dark. The blister was a ruin, shattered bone matrix, exposed framework, the outer hull torn open. Debris floated in zero gravity, and in the center of it all, slowly spinning, was the neutronium torque. The Archon's torque. Jorik grabbed it. The torque was cold, dense, heavier than it looked. He turned it over. There was no sign of his uncle. "He's not here," Jorik said. "The torque is here, but he's not." "Could he have been ejected?" one of the team asked. Jorik looked around. The blister was open to space. If Koreth had been in the blister when the impact hit, he would have been pulled into the void. "Search the debris field," Jorik ordered. "Find him." But they never found him. The Archon Koreth Vin had simply vanished. His torque was recovered, but his body was not. The hegemony would hold a formal memorial. They would etch his name into the carapace of a new dreadnought. They would hold conferences. They would never know what happened to him. On the Steadfast, Soar set the harmonica on her desk. She had played the 3 notes. She had sent the message. The war was over. Thorn approached. "Admiral, the Zorvani are withdrawing. They've signaled that they will accept your terms." Soar nodded. "Good. The Valley ambassador has requested a meeting. She wants to discuss the implications." "I'll meet her, but not today. Today I want to sit here and drink my cold tea." Thorn smiled. "Yes, Admiral." Soar picked up the ceramic cup. She took a sip. The tea was still cold. It didn't matter. "The war is over," she said. "But the war is never really over. The Zorvani will spend years trying to understand what happened. They'll write reports. They'll hold hearings. They'll question their own arithmetic. And what will they find?" Soar looked at the harmonica. "They'll find nothing, because they will never understand what they could not see. They spent 6,000 years building an empire on visibility. We spent 89 years building silence." Silence. Silence is not absence. It is patience. It is waiting. It is the sound of a species that knows what it is and does not need to prove it. Thorn looked at the harmonica. "And the 3 notes." Soar picked up the harmonica. She held it in her palm. "The 3 notes are not a message. They are a memory, a reminder of what we are. We are not conquerors. We are not administrators. We are the species that waited, and when we spoke, we did not need to shout." 40 years later, the Zorvani still did not understand the 3 notes. They had held conferences. They had composed 900 pages of analysis. They had interrogated every human diplomat, every historian, every musician they could find. None of them could explain it. The harmonica itself was kept in a vault on Zorvani Prime, labeled cultural artifact, significance unknown. It was the most studied object in hegemony history. Scholars had written dissertations on its construction, its provenance, its dented brass. They had never heard it played. In a quiet office on Earth, Admiral Bryn Soar, now retired, received a letter from the Vali ambassador. The letter was brief. The Zorvani have classified the harmonica as a weapon of psychological warfare. They still do not understand that it was never a weapon. It was a song. Soar read the letter once, then she set it down. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a photograph, a faded image of a woman in Marseille, 2089, holding a harmonica and smiling. That woman was her great-great-grandmother. Soar looked at the photograph. Then she looked out the window at the earth below, blue, fragile, full of life. She did not play the harmonica. She did not need to. The war was over. The galaxy had never heard the song, but the song was still there, in the silence between the notes, waiting for someone who knew how to listen. The torque spun on a display in a Zorvani museum. It caught the light from a star 400 light-years away and kept spinning. No one reached for it. No one could.